He is a man on a mission, fighting to come back from a devastating injury.
Breathe.
Beating the odds, not only physically,
Get down. Come on.
but also emotionally.
There we go. Get it?
Give me 5.
Not only for himself,
Down
for
low.
his family,
Too slow.
and in some ways, even for the people who saved his life.
There's little Stella.
Look at that.
Brett Parks is just 35, still young, but he'll tell you, as will his wife and doctors, that he's lucky to be here, lucky to be alive. His life changed forever with an act of heroism. Brett won't call it that, but others will, and it's what has brought him to this point in his life.
All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear a scream, and that startled me. I was like, what's going on here?
Brett Parks was a U.S. Navy air crewman stationed at NAS Jax. He also spent some of his time as a personal trainer, and that's why he was standing here outside the Southside apartment complex that October night. He was waiting for a client when he heard that scream from a robbery victim.
So I just drop all my things, and I start sprinting over there. As I turned the corner, the robber saw me, and that's when he tried to get away.
What he did next would change his life forever. Brett chased down the suspect and tried to hold him until police arrived.
I just heard 2 gunshots, and one of those 2 bullets struck me in the abdomen. I fell like a load of bricks.
I got a phone call, and it was Brett, but it's not him. It's a female. And she said, "Hi, your husband's been shot."
Lying on the ground, Brett only thought about one thing: his family, his wife, his young son, his soon-to-be-born daughter.
I knew I was going to die. I remember whispering to God. I whispered to him, I said, "Lord, I'm coming to see you today." At that moment, I started thinking about Stella, and I was so upset because I was never going to see her face. I was never going to dance with her on her wedding day. I thought of Jason and what kind of man he was going to grow up to be without a father. And I thought of my wife, Susan. I was wondering how she was going to be without me.
On the verge of giving up, something else happened.
And I looked up at the sky and I saw, it was like in The Wizard of Oz, where at the beginning you see black and white, and then she opens the door to Oz and it's all color. That's how it felt right then. I looked up and I saw the blue sky with the orange and purple clouds, and I saw the trees and how green the trees were against the blue sky. And at that moment, I said to myself, I'm going to live. I'm going to make it.
One thing I did hear was Brett in the background, and he did say, "Tell her I love her and ask her what's for dinner." And I can't tell you how much that meant to me, because I held on to those words for the next 20 days.
911, what's your emergency? And is he a trauma alert? Okay, we'll give you an ETA once they're lifted, okay?
From the South Side to UF Health Jacksonville, the clock began ticking for Brett.
Gate Parkway and Southside Boulevard, where's he shot?
Rushed into trauma, and then the operating room. But fate was on his side. On duty that day, Dr. James Dennis, the chief of vascular surgery. It was just what Brett needed at that exact moment.
The more we explored, the more injury we found, the more bleeding that started to happen, to the point that it was quite obvious that he had a major vascular injury.
So bad that Dr. Dennis wasn't sure he'd be able to stop the bleeding. The bullet had ripped through Brett's abdomen, destroying part of the largest vein in the body.
One of the worst, if not the worst, place to have a major vascular injury. Some surgeons call that the angle of death, because if you get into bleeding from that area, unfortunately, most people do not survive.
Stopping the flow of blood, saving Brett's life, was not something Dr. Dennis could do alone. Standing by his side were two other UF Health surgeons, residents Eric Roberts and Chester Royals. At one point, all three men had their hands inside Brett's body, working furiously to stop the bleeding.
We just couldn't stop it. We couldn't slow it down.
The reason I consider him to be a miracle case is that, we had several spots throughout the procedure where we, stopped and kind of held pressure, but we stopped working. Should we continue? Should we stop? What should we do next?
But I think we all deep down inside knew that we had to continue to give it every last bit of effort that we could.
And throughout this struggle, the fight to save Brett, his wife Susan waited.
I just couldn't believe any of this was happening to us, because this doesn't happen to people like us.
7 months pregnant with Stella. Hour after hour, she waited. It was hard for the doctors to explain what was going on.
Hours and hours and hours later, I didn't hear anything. So I started to worry.
Her hands were just trembling. So I remember just squatting down next to her and trying to hold her hand, knowing that, sorry, that could be my wife in that situation. And telling her that, her husband is very sick and in danger of dying, but that we were going to do everything we could to get him through this, and that she needed to go see him and be with him.
I knew they were so invested in Brett and our family.
Brett was in a medically induced coma for 20 days. Little by little, his health improved, but there were setbacks. In all, Brett went through a dozen surgeries. One of them returned blood flow to the leg, but it wasn't enough. The damage was too great, and doctors recommended amputating. Susan had to make the decision.
So I said, do what you need to do to keep my husband here. And I gave them permission to proceed with the amputation.
Weeks later, Brett would tell her it was the right decision.
In a window, I see my reflection in a window, and it really confused me. So I turned to Susie and I said, Susie, I said, do I have a foot? And she looks at me and she says, no, you don't. And I look at her and I say, well, do you still love me? And she looked me straight in the eye and she said, Brett, I didn't marry you for your foot. And I was like, okay, all right, good, I'm good. Do you like that?
Yes.
Yes? You want more?
Yes.
What do you say?
Please.
No.
Please.
Good doesn't do Brett's recovery justice. Great is more like it, but even that's an understatement. Imagine his emotions when he finally came back home.
And I turned and I saw him from the garage door. I said, hey, buddy. And he just hit the ground running. He just started running towards me as fast as he could. And he runs to the couch and he jumps up on me and he sits right next to me. It was like no time passed at all. And it was such a relief for me.
Back at home with his family, his children, his life.
And I see my little girl and I hold her and she looks at me and she just saw right through me. She just leveled me. I just melted away and I held her close to my ear and I told her, I said, Stella, I'm your daddy. I said, I will always protect you. I will always be there for you. And I will love you forever, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And of course, there's the woman who stood tall throughout this ordeal, whose strength reinforced Brett's recovery and her family.
Before we all go to sleep, we're all in one place, and even the dog's up on the bed. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, wow, this is my world right here. Man, what a great life I have,
That is so awesome. That is so wonderful.
And then there are the people who will always be a part of Brett and Susie's lives. The bond between their family and UF Health now seems unbreakable.
Hey. Thank you. How are you? They were part of saving my life, and And it was such a great feeling seeing all of them and how happy they were to see me. You know, I'd never expect to walk into a room and so many people be happy to see me. Thank you so much, Doc. It's great to see you.
You too.
Saying they are close just doesn't do it. So close that the staff even threw a baby shower for Brett and Susie's little girl.
That was the most incredible, overwhelming baby shower ever.
Wow.
Brett and Susie also know this wouldn't be happening without the help of so many caregivers and first responders.
He will call on me and I will answer him.
Brett has not only accepted what happened, he's using it now to help others. He created Second Shot Ministries to let people know what happens in life can always be changed.
When I was in the hospital, so many little things had to come together for it to be perfect. You know, everybody was just there at the right place at the right time. And that's just not coincidence, you know. I felt the Lord around me. I felt God with me. Even in my coma, when I was having these dreams that I was having, the Lord was there, and He was holding me, and He was protecting me. And I know He kept me here for a reason.
To see him again in clinic and talk to him and to get to know him as a person, which we never have a chance to do really in the trauma center, was quite inspiring.
How do you thank somebody for saving your life? I mean, I'll come back around and see you. Thank you doesn't do it. It's like, can I buy you something, like a car? What do I do?
I'm going to do it either way.
The people who took care of Brett say they do it for everyone who comes through these doors. But they don't need a thank you. Seeing him survive against the odds and return to a happy life with his family is more than enough.
One thing when families come in the trauma center and you talk to families after an injury to a loved one, they always ask, well, has anybody else had this? Has anybody else survived when you didn't think they would? And you know, you can't go to them now and say no, because now you have to tell them, you know, yeah, I know somebody made it through this.
I am a product of what they do every day. My health is the reason why many of these doctors get into this field.
A story I don't think I'll forget for the rest of my life. I mean, it'll always be there and always be something that we can talk about and say, do you remember Brett? Do you remember Susan? Do you remember waiting to have a baby and getting him through that and getting him to the point where he could get back home and see that new baby and see his other child and be with them and be dad and be a husband, and I'll be a productive member of our community again, and that's what our story is, and it's very powerful to see it turn out like this.
The doctors at UF Health and UF Health in general, I will never forget. I'll never forget. They're in my life, in our lives forever.
The things that he's going to do, I can't wait to see. He's just taken this tragedy and made it into an opportunity to inspire others and just tell others that it'll be okay. You can get through this. I got through this. I would say I get all of my life from Brett. So thank you for saving my life.
I'm not the hero. The heroes are all these doctors and these surgeons and these nurses. Everybody at UF Health that has really, they just rallied around me and they said, we're going to do everything we can to make sure this man lives. And they do it every day. They do this every day.